Good morning, everybody. My name is Joe, and I'm a weapon of mass instruction. And it is almost 4 o'clock in the morning. Yay. And I was surfing on YouTube, and I found a video where a scientist was talking about the Higgs boson particle, nicknamed the God particle by the media, which is apparently short for the goddamn particle because it was so hard for them to find. They still technically haven't found it, but they've correlated a lot of evidence apparently that says it exists. And so all the comments in the comment section, or at least most of them, did not actually talk about this particular article. What they were actually talking about was the existence of God versus, the Big Bang. So that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. I was watching a video as well, talking about miniature mosquito-type drones, or UAVs. Basically, micro organisms, not nano-organisms. They're very small. And their applications, and somebody was talking about operating on a different wavelength of energy. I'm going to talk about that as well. And I'm sure y'all have heard enough about what I talk about regarding theology or spirituality to have known already by this point that I am a pantheist. And what that basically means is I personally believe that God didn't create the universe, it became the universe. The Big Bang Theory, contrary to what a lot of people believe, basically states that the universe began as a nearly infinitely organized, orderly conglomeration, basically, of all the matter and the energy of the universe in one single point. You can't even see it. It's so small. That's how tightly packed all this energy and matter is. Well, they have no way of actually measuring something like that. That's just a theory. But also, if you think about the concept of God, that also defies all physics theory involved in science. So if you think about it, if you're looking for a grand unifying theory of theology and science, religion and science, spirituality and science, that could be it. God is all of the matter of the universe, all of the energy of the universe in that single infinitesimal point, that singularity. And hence, all of our souls and consciousnesses, right? Consciousness you can't really refute, I should say. The soul, well, that really depends on the believer or disbeliever. I personally believe we do have a soul. And that belief is based on just life experience. I mean, we can consciously communicate with each other, complex, abstract ideas. Is that simply a measure of our brain power? Or is there something behind that that allows us to use our brains in that manner? And it makes more sense to me than a big guy in the sky created, all life on Earth in a matter of 6 days. And it took one of those days to actually create all the billions and billions of stars and planets of the rest of the universe. So he was able to create all of that in one day, but it took him 5 other days to create all this stuff on Earth. Because we're so freaking special, right? But at the same time, it's hard to make sense of that Big Bang theory. But my sense is that there is something greater than us out there. Something that created us. Intelligent design, maybe. What if all of our consciousnesses all meshed together, all at the same point, we all came up with this consensus of saying, okay, let's create a physical universe to occupy with space, time, multiple dimensions. Let us go forth and build this new space, this area, as opposed to let's all stay living and crowded in this infinitesimal point, all in one. I mean, you know, familiarity breeds contempt and all that shit. And then, so I was listening to people or reading people arguing about whether the way to fight the powers that be is through defeating the technologies that they're bringing out against us. Like one guy suggested using magnets to attract all these microscopic or very small UAVs or drones, while at the same time, you know, using certain types of energy to discharge any buildup of, you know, odd energy in your body, like different stuff like that. But at the same time, somebody else is talking about like change your body's wavelengths to a different energy wavelength, and that'll defeat everything that relies on everybody being on the same wavelength as we are right now. Well, I don't hear too many people talking about mitochondria. Mitochondria. Look it up. A mitochondrion is basically a prokaryotic cell that resides in most of our eukaryotic cells in the human body and in other species across the globe. And it does several things. It controls cellular decay, cell death. It controls energy supply, as well as other signaling functions and all that stuff. Well, the Wikipedia article says that mitochondria produce most of the energy that the cell needs, and other organelles produce the rest. But I remember hearing about this in school and actually picking up on this, that the energy produced by possibly produced by mitochondria is far greater than the energy needed by each individual cell on its own and in conjunction with other cells to do their jobs. So there's a huge surplus of energy. Where does it go? Where does it go? Well, you know, the theory is that it builds up inside of the mitochondria and is stored for later use, like a battery, which makes sense. You know, we can run and then in a heartbeat sprint, and where do we get that extra burst of energy and speed from? The mitochondria through aerobic, anaerobic, and cellular respiration types of producing energy. Now, I'm not a real big biologist here or anything. I just know the textbook basics and a little bit of inference from other stuff. But, you know, that may be where you get the answers to your prayers if you are a Christian or a Muslim or a Catholic or Jew. Take a look at some things out there like 12-step programs. And if you get your hands on the 12 steps for any given program, especially AA or NA, very early in the steps, it says something along the nature of, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could relieve us of our alcoholism, addiction, whatever the problem happens to be. But nowhere in those texts does it actually tell you what that higher power needs to be. It's simply a power greater than yourself, because self-will didn't do the trick. But God's will just might, because everything else didn't work. I've talked to people in programs, and it works for them. And all in all, it's a good program to live by, even if you don't have a problem. It's just an idea. But how is it that all of these different religions and all these different faiths can cure these people from their addiction or alcoholism when nothing else can? Is it simply mind over matter? Or does the mere act of truthfully praying or meditating, or in certain belief systems, practicing magic or rituals, can they actually affect the energy in your body? Can it change the wavelength of that energy to something higher or lower? People talk about lower wavelengths as being more solid, not in a purely literal sense, but it's a denser signal. Lower wavelengths are more stable, higher wavelengths are more fragile, right? But also a higher wavelength has a much higher gain in potential energy. It's a geometric gain, in fact, if I'm not mistaken. So at the very, very, very high end of energy waves and rays, which are actually quite literally particles of energy, that's how light can be bent through gravity. The gravity well of planets allow you to see a star that's actually just below the horizon, stuff like that. That's why the moon appears bigger, because that gravity well, as well as the medium of the atmosphere, changes its apparent location from the observer. Kind of got off track there, but is it possible that any given personal belief system, if you believe that you can commune with something greater than yourself, does it physically change your energy output? When I was in high school, a friend of mine, she told me that she was a Wiccan, that she practiced witchcraft. At the time, I was pretty skeptical of that. I was raised Catholic, and I was still kind of into it, and I was like, I don't know about that. She said, well, give me your hand. So I held up my hand, and she held her hand about 3 inches above it. She closed her eyes, and she concentrated, and in about 10-15 seconds, my hand started to burn. Like, I felt literally heat. She didn't tell me she was going to burn my hand. She didn't tell me she was going to do anything to my hand. I felt this intense heat. And then she took her hand away, and she said, there you go. That's Wicca. That's witchcraft. That's my belief. The evidence was right there in my senses, what I sensed at that moment, that heat. Well, by the end of that class, and I was sitting right next to her, I saw that she wasn't doing anything with like a lighter or any sort of source of fire at all. I would have seen it. By the end of that class, literally a matter of minutes, she had, the markings of second-degree burns on her hand. And she explained about how if you do a negative act, if you cause harm to somebody, which technically she did by burning my hand a little bit, it returns to you threefold. What if the physical manifestation of her belief on a mental level was actually literally her hand heated up, and that heat that radiated to me, because its source was her hand, which was unprotected, of course, from intense heat, actually started to blister because of that. Because of the mitochondria in her cells producing much more energy than they had a couple seconds ago, and converting that energy into heat. And we are endothermic organisms. We produce heat, energy in our bodies, and it radiates outward from our bodies. So you can actually heat somebody up simply by hovering your hand over them without even thinking about it, simply because that heat that goes off your hand will reach their hand, and blah blah blah, it'll start to absorb into their hand. But she was actually concentrating on sending out heat energy. And the way she explained it was she visualized fire from her hand, like a fireball. Now here's another crazy leap of faith for everybody. I always go and refer back to predictive programming, or fictional movies, or what we think of as fictional movies, science fiction or fantasy, that somehow actually parallel or display something that we could potentially or already do see happen in our world. For example, the idea of the Matrix being this control scheme by these machines. Well, what do we have in the real world but our daily lives are being controlled? What we see, hear, feel in our lives are being controlled by this secret machinery, this Illuminati, the illuminated ones, the Order. A lot of sci-fi books and movies 100 years ago, well, not the movies aspect, but the books, and even like 50 years ago in films, we're seeing a lot of that as modern technology. Star Trek, started out in the late 60s, 70s? Back when orange was a really popular color for everything. I don't know. They had their communicators, quite literally cell phones, in their hands, but nobody had ever seen a cell phone before. Not a huge stretch, but flip open phone, just like the Motorola Razr originally was. Just like that. What about Dick Tracy? You remember his super duper spy watch where he could actually talk to people and see their image? And now, today, there are actually watch type things that you could wear with a really small HD screen in it that you can monitor security cameras or even hold a video conference with somebody. Crazy stuff, but they had it in what, the 30s, 40s? The 50s? They pictured that. And now it's fact. So this is leading up into, I'm sure some of you have guessed it already, just by the name of this organelle that I was talking about, the mitochondria. Very similar to midi-chlorians in Star Wars Episode 1, that crazy idea. And yes, what is it in plant cells? It's basically their version of mitochondria. It's their source of energy. Again, same idea. It can produce much more energy than the cell actually needs. It has its own DNA structure. It is literally a separate organism that lives inside of our bodies and helps us in innumerable ways. We would be like sloths if we didn't have this. We would just not have that energy that we need. But where does the excess go? So think about Star Wars. They're always talking about use the Force. And they talk about how, the midi-chlorians are the source of the Force. The source of the Force. And how by concentrating on your midi-chlorians and affecting their energy, you can literally affect your reality through telekinesis, through barriers, through energy manipulation, like all that stuff. And we hear about psychic abilities, telekinesis, the ability to see the future, psychic barriers, which, and if you look out in the world around you, there's people out there who just live in a certain way, and without even realizing it, they're like disease-free. They seem to have all the best luck. And how is it? How is that possible? That they just have all the good stuff in life like that without working for it and not being born into it and somehow having a really great immune system? Could it just be genetics, or is it simply a subconscious connection to their mitochondria, which is affecting its power output and its power frequency, which is producing these effects? Tie it back into the God particle, the Higgs boson. And the idea behind that is it is the subatomic particle that gives all matter its mass. It's basically piggybacks onto everything, and it gives it mass. But is it piggybacked onto energy? How is it that these particles combine together so easily and produce complex forms of matter? You know? It's almost like order out of chaos, but what if that is part of the infinite order at the beginning of the universe, and these Higgs boson particles are part of what created, or I should say, what that infinitesimal point was? What held all of that matter and energy together in that single point? How was it possible for that to be like that in the first place? Was it possibly this proliferation of this hypothetical particle? And in essence, it permeates everything. The force, it has a light side and a dark side. It exists in everything, and it binds the universe together. It seems to me like the truth is looking a lot like fiction, and the fiction is looking a lot like truth. I just dove a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole than I intended to tonight, this morning. And I'm going to seriously put some more thought into this. I haven't even watched any like crazy documentaries. This is just stuff that I'm coming up with in my head based on empirical evidence and personal beliefs. What do you think? Am I going completely off the deep end? Or is there something to this idea that we can consciously control these energy fields around us without anything special like, you know, generators or orgone devices? Well, there we go. Somehow, some way they work. They work. They punch holes in the freaking clouds. They kill chemtrails. They kill chem clouds. Supposedly by collecting and channeling this substance, this energy that permeates the universe, the good and bad together, or by use of a crystal inside of the organic medium, simply the good, for whatever reason, the good energy. Where did we come up with this duality of good and evil anyway? It has always been acceptable to kill in times of war, but not to kill for any other reason except in literally defense against violence. How is it that one is good, potentially, but one is also evil, potentially? If I kill a squirrel and don't eat it, is that evil? Or is it simply just misguided? If I kill a squirrel and do eat it, is that good? Should I have not killed that squirrel in the first place and found a plant to eat? But I'm killing the plant to eat it. All through our lives, we kill. Sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously. Be it simply a fragile blade of grass that we step on carelessly, or an ant that we either didn't see or we stomped on. How important is that individual life? That one single life? Well, if we are permeated by this particle, and we are permeated with this energy that shapes and defines our existence, then does it stand to reason that we are quite literally part of that which we kill, and therefore when we kill something else, we are killing part of ourself? Ooh, now we've gone so deep. We've gone fucking balls deep into this discussion here. This tirade, this rant, this soliloquy, this philosophical muse. delusion. There is a theory of reality called, I believe, solipsism. Solipsism. First read about it actually in the book novel adaptation of the video game Doom by ID Software. Amazingly enough, this guy gets into a deep moment when thinks he's going crazy on Mars, killing all these demons and shit. What he thought of as demons, but turned out to be aliens. Huh. Amazing that. And he has a moment where he says, okay, wait, did I somehow slip into the solipsism to where I am quite literally imagining my universe and it is becoming my reality? So he closes his eyes for a second and imagines a reality where those demons or aliens don't exist and he doesn't have to kill them to survive. Opens up his eyes, but they're still there. But if you truly pray to a deity, if you truly meditate, if you truly focus your mind on using the Force, unlocking your Super Saiyan potential, that sounds crazy, but, basis in fact, people don't just imagine things based on what's the craziest thing I can come up with. There is some sort of basis in fact, whether it's a symbol, or an extension of a current idea, or simply, what have you. Or practitioners of magic, if you truly try to cast a spell, or a ritual, or a rite. And we hear all about the Illuminati, or the Order, conducting these rituals, this magic that they're trying to work, using numerology, and symbolism, and mass hypnotism, which again, people thought it didn't exist. It does. It really, really does. I saw a hypnotist in my senior year of high school when I was starting to wake up to the idea that maybe Catholicism isn't the end-all be-all of this is what's right in the world. And completely random person in the crowd, like several completely random people in the crowd, like I can't imagine any of these people actually agreeing, except on the spot. I couldn't see any way for them, at least all of them, to have been picked by the hypnotist, because we didn't even know he was going to be there. And most of them I had eye contact with leading up into this hypnotist show at my senior graduation party in high school. Got called up onto the stage, and he starts doing his hypnotist thing, and all these people are doing this crazy stuff. And people are using their cell phones to take pictures and video of it, and it's hilarious. And they come back from it thinking they just had a crazy dream and fell asleep in their seats. It was good stuff, entertaining as hell, but how did it work? That energy expenditure, possibly. Can you expend your energy to affect your reality? Is that what prayer is? By the truly, truly believing, the truly, truly faithful to their own personal beliefs. Now, people can tell you left and right how God didn't answer their prayers, but out of all those people, how many of them truly have belief in their particular deity of choice? How many of them trust completely the infallibility of their deity, the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-consuming infiniteness of their deity? How many of them have that level of faith? But at the same time, you go out of that church, temple, synagogue, wherever, and you find yourself an open meeting of any 12-step group, and just sit in the back and listen in. Don't betray their anonymity. That's half of the name, and that's half of what it's all about. Just listen into what they're talking about, and how somehow, some way, The simple program worked for them and millions of others from the 30s until today, and it's still working for them as we speak. They lost everything imaginable. They hit a mental, spiritual, moral bottom, and they built it back up based on a spiritual lifestyle, not a religious lifestyle. Spiritual lifestyle. They all have the freedom to believe what they want, but it always works if they truly work for it and believe that it is doing what they can't do for themselves. It all comes full circle. I have no idea how much of this is based in fact, but I have seen the results in multiple different circumstances, multiple different types of demonstrations, and by being a good person and trying to do good towards the world in my own life. Thank you for listening, everybody. You all stay safe now. Have a great Independence Day. Project that positive energy. Do a good thing for somebody else, and see if that karma doesn't come right back and smack you with something good in return. Peace.